It's all I know. I'm so happy to be Tiffany Trump. I'm so happy to be, in the family I'm in with my siblings and my father and my mother.
He draws out the talent and drive in people so that they can achieve their full potential. That's a great quality to have in a father, and better yet, in the President of the United States.
Mexico has got to help us at the border. They're not going to help us at the border. It's a very sad thing.
Are President Trump and his daughter Tiffany trying to repair what's being described as a damaged relationship? Father and daughter reportedly had not seen each other in many months, even though she attends Georgia.
Didn't even tell us that he had met with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower filing the complaint. Adam Schiff didn't tell us the way he treated Ambassador Sondland last week in this, Ambassador Volker in this interview last week. That treatment is the reason why the administration, the State Department said we're not going to subject Ambassador Sondland to the same treatment. And look, we were actually looking forward to hearing from Ambassador Sondland. We thought he was going to reinforce exactly what Ambassador Volker told us last week. But again, unfortunately, when you have a Speaker of the House who says we need to strike while the iron's hot, when you have a chairman of the committee who is so biased against this president that he wouldn't even tell us that he had met with, his staff had met with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower filing the complaint. And frankly, this is a pattern with Mr. Schiff. He did the same thing, if you remember, the first big hearing the Democrats did this Congress, Michael Cohen. He didn't tell us that his staff had met with Mr. Cohen for hours prior to Mr. Cohen testifying. He didn't tell us that last summer he had met with Mr. Simpson out in Colorado, palling around with the guy with Fusion GPS. So this is a pattern. Like I said, we were hoping to hear from the ambassador today, but we understand exactly why the administration, exactly why the State Department has chosen to say, look, if it's going to be this kind of process, if you're going to selectively leak text messages, 67 pages of text messages we had, they take a handful and release to all of you, and not give the full context and not release the transcript, we understand why they made this decision at this moment. I'm going to let some of my...
Ambassador Sondland says he's disappointed that he wasn't allowed to attend this deposition today.
Yeah, and I said the same thing. We wish he would have been able to testify too, but we fully understand why the administration made the decision they did. When you're going to have a chairman release certain parts of what was said in a closed-door interview and not release the entire transcript and give it context, you can see why they didn't want to subject Ambassador Sondland to the same kind of treatment.
Do any of you have concerns? There's no wrongdoing here. Isn't that all the more reason why he should be allowed to come up and testify, just answer all of your questions?
Yeah, there is no wrongdoing. Ambassador Volker was clear. Remember, Ambassador Volker is... Why not release the transcript so you can all see what Ambassador Volker told us? There is no wrongdoing. He was completely as clear as could be, no quid pro quo whatsoever. The two guys on the call, no quid pro quo whatsoever. Democrat chairman, after they read the transcript, said no quid pro quo whatsoever. But Adam Schiff doesn't want that information out there. So he's holding up the transcript, and he continues to have this bias against the president, the way he runs things.
I believe that I do believe that we'll actually get to hear from the ambassador, but we'll only get to hear from him when there is a fair process. This is not a fair process. I can tell you, we spent more time in the skiff last time with Ambassador Volker than Adam Schiff did. He came out here, you may have noticed that, he came out here all to the press, and what did he do? He gave this benign thing and then raced off to a fundraiser. So here's what we have to understand, is this has to be a fair process. And when you have a press release being drafted by our Democrat colleagues, cherry-picking text messages, when the full text of Ambassador Volker's testimony last week would have exonerated this president, let's release it. I'm all for bringing the ambassador in, but let's only do so after we release the full.
Do you have any concerns about what we're talking about here? The president asking foreign government, one Ukraine, to investigate Joe Biden, and also the president saying last week that China should investigate Joe Biden. Do any of you have concerns about that?
President's doing his job. President, when you're talking about the hard-earned tax dollars of the American people going to a foreign government, the president's going to make sure that there is no corruption there. He's doing his job, his duty as the commander-in-chief, his duty as the president of the United States. So I don't have a concern about that.
Should not testify on Friday either. Given your concerns about this process, the next testimony is supposed to be Friday.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
We would sure like to see the Volker testimony released before we continue the depositions and transcribed interviews. What we see in this impeachment is a kangaroo court, and Chairman Schiff is acting like a malicious Captain Kangaroo. He lied about the Russia investigation, that he had more than circumstantial evidence. He lied about meeting with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower's ultimate writing of their complaint. And we would like to unpack the last set of Schiff lies regarding the Volker testimony before we go to the next set of Schiff lies on Sondland or any further witnesses.
Since we had it. It should have been out immediately.
The Democrats say Republicans are just obsessed with contacting the chairman's office and the whistleblower, and then it's just a process issue. It doesn't really matter how you respond to them.
We think there are real concerns there. I know you've done some reporting on that, so we think there are real concerns that hopefully over time the American people will be able to see. Can't really get into all that, but yeah, we have real concerns.
Congress, should we take any legal action to actually try and unmask the whistleblower at any point?
No, but I think the American people have a right to know who the whistleblower is, but we're not going to do that.
Why would the State Department cancel this deposition just a few hours before it was set to begin, after Ambassador Sondland had already flown back here from Brussels?
I think the hope was we would have the Volker testimony released.
Give the majority enough time, the maximum amount of time, to release the testimony that happened last week. And so we have that information out there. We know in good faith that they, in good faith, are going to release the testimony for the American people to see, as opposed to parsing out little pieces that support their narrative. And if they're willing to do that, then I think that the administration will be willing to do more moving forward. But if it's going to be a one-sided deal.
Hold on, you guys are all journalists. Is there a single journalist here that doesn't want to see the full transcript of Ambassador Volker's testimony? I agree, and the American people agree with every one of you. Let them judge for themselves. That's what we need to do.
So there's an argument against releasing the Volker transcript before all the other witnesses test them.
You mean Adam Schiff made the argument?
I'm just putting it out there for you to respond. There's an argument against releasing the Volker.
Who made the argument? I haven't heard that argument, and so at this particular,
there's an argument against transparency. There's an argument. No, hold on a second. There's an argument in favor of cherry-picking selective releases of texts. There's an argument in favor of only telling the American public what is best in the interests of wanting to take down a sitting president. Maybe you should ask what was said inside of Volker's deposition during his transcribed interview with regards to Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge that aid from the United States to Ukraine was being linked to an investigation into the Bidens. Why don't you ask, what did Ambassador Volker say about that? That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked that question. And I'll tell you the reason why that question was so important for you to ask is for many things, because he was in this room for several hours. And during several hours of testimony, he talked about how President Zelensky had no idea that there was a hold-on aid at the time of the July 25th call. Ambassador Volker testified about how the readouts of the phone call that was made to him, that there was nothing in the readouts about there being a hold on U.S. aid or a quid pro quo. Or Ambassador Volker testified, this is what the transcribed interview would tell you if you asked this question. I'm glad that we're having this discussion. The next day, Ambassador Volker meets with President Zelensky. And in that meeting, there is no reference to a quid pro quo or President Zelensky having any idea that there was a hold on aid. Or, over the course of Ambassador Volker's next several weeks engaging with Ukraine, Ukraine makes no reference to there being a hold on aid or there being a quid pro quo. And by the way, you know what else Ambassador Volker testified to? This entire time, the aid was getting released. It was going to get released. And guess what happened? The aid got released. And you know what didn't have to happen? There was no new investigation that had to get created. This whole thing is a fairy tale. Adam Schiff is misleading you, and you're playing along with it. Many of you are, and the American public is then getting deceived. When Adam Schiff said, for example, that President Trump was asking President Zelensky to manufacture dirt on the Bidens, you know what Ambassador Volker testified to? That was absolutely untrue. Now that's what we would call an inconvenient fact for the narrative. You know what else Adam Schiff has been saying to you and the American public that was not true? That he had no contact with the whistleblower. He'd like to, but he didn't have any contact. He lied. You know what else he lied about? When he gave his opening statement from the acting director of national intelligence as to what was in front of the world as far as what the transcribed interview said. Now going back to Ambassador Volker's transcribed interview and a process, we were here ready to do our part. If anyone is going to testify behind those closed doors, we're going to make sure that we're there to ensure that the other 99% of the story is being told. Because guess what? If we weren't there last Thursday, you would have no idea of everything that Ambassador Volker said to obliterate Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge. You would have no idea. So we're here. Now, as far as the administration goes, if they don't want to send Ambassador Sondland here, because this is a kangaroo court, because there has not been a vote to launch an impeachment inquiry, because the minority does not have any rights for subpoenas, because the president doesn't have the right to have counsel present to ask questions, for subpoena power, to present evidence. This entire thing is a political charade, is a clown show. We're here, we're ready for whoever's going to be testifying in the other room, but we have to be here because if we're not, Adam Schiff sure as heck is not going to tell you, because all he has to do is right now release that transcribed interview, because he won't, because it destroys his narrative. It undercuts it, it blows it up. That's what we heard over the course of several hours. And by the way, Jerry Connolly comes on to, Aaron Burnett's show on CNN at 7 o'clock on Thursday, and they have a back and forth. They play a clip from Jim Jordan, they play a clip from me, where they're basically saying, Jerry Connolly, you didn't hear anything of what Jim Jordan and Lee Zeldin says that they heard, right? And they have this back and forth, basically dumbing down their audience. And what isn't pointed out in that back and forth is that Jerry Connolly was the last person to show up. He's the first one to leave instantly. He wasn't there for any of it. So what's important is that we are here, and we can answer any question you want as far as what Ambassador Volker testified to, credibly, exceptionally, professionally. But you're not asking any of the most important questions. Some of you are, but many of you aren't asking the most important questions, such as, what did you hear last Thursday that we don't yet know about? Adam Schiff won't answer it, but he should. He should release the transcript.
We'll take a couple more.